Daniel and Michael had built a small but thriving catering business over the past 5 years. Every morning began before dawn, chopping vegetables, preparing sauces, and ensuring every meal met their high standards. Their clients trusted them because of their dedication, and their reputation in the community was solid. But one morning, Daniel received a text from a longtime client. "Sorry, we've decided to cancel your service. Lawson Catering offered us a lower price." Michael frowned. "Dad, that's Mr. Lawson. He's trying to steal our clients. And it's not just one. I've heard from others that he's lying about us, claiming we cut corners." Daniel took a deep breath. He had faced difficult people before, but Lawson's tactics were becoming aggressive and underhanded. "We're not going to fight him with anger or threats," he said calmly. "We'll fight him with evidence, strategy, and patience." Over the next several weeks, father and son began documenting every move Lawson made. They gathered screenshots of misleading social media posts, copied emails where he promised discounts in exchange for canceling contracts with Daniel and Michael's business, and even interviewed clients who had been misled. Michael, though frustrated, followed his father's guidance, learning the importance of detailed documentation and patience. They carefully cross-referenced every claim Lawson had made against invoices, receipts, and correspondence proving that Daniel and Michael had always delivered high-quality, timely service. Once their dossier was complete, they approached the local health board, submitting evidence of Lawson's false claims and violations of hygiene standards. Inspections were conducted, and minor but telling infractions were found at Lawson's premises: improper food storage, expired items, and inadequate sanitation practices. Clients who had been misled were informed of the findings, and the truth about Lawson's dishonest practices began to circulate quickly in the community. Michael watched as business that had been slipping back toward Lawson started returning to their catering company. "Dad, people actually believe us now," he said, a sense of relief in his voice. Daniel nodded. "It's not just about being believed. It's about creating a system where dishonesty can't survive." The climax came during a large city event. Lawson had been hired for a simultaneous catering gig, but Daniel and Michael's company, prepared and well-documented, delivered flawlessly. The event organizers noticed the difference, and word spread quickly. Lawson's reputation, already weakened by inspections and client complaints, was further tarnished. He could no longer undercut, lie, or manipulate without consequences. By the end of the month, his client list had dwindled dramatically, while Daniel and Michael's catering business grew stronger than ever. Michael turned to his father one evening, exhausted but smiling. "We didn't just survive, Dad. We crushed him without ever stooping to his level." Daniel ruffled his son's hair, pride swelling in his chest. "That's the point, son. The smartest revenge doesn't require being dirty. It requires patience, strategy, and letting evidence speak louder than anger." For Lawson, the lesson was clear. Dishonesty and aggression against a well-prepared, intelligent opponent only leads to ruin. And for Daniel and Michael, it reinforced the lessons they had learned over years of facing injustice together. Unity, planning, and integrity could overcome even the most determined adversary. Their business thrived, their clients trusted them more than ever, and father and son knew they had achieved the ultimate revenge not through malice, but through skill, preparation, and unwavering commitment to justice. Michael had always prided himself on working hard in college. He spent hours preparing assignments, studying late into the night, and double-checking every detail before submitting his work. But one semester, he noticed something that made his blood boil. A classmate, Jason, had been cheating on nearly every major assignment and exam, yet somehow consistently earned the highest grades in the course. Michael's frustration grew as he saw Jason flaunt his success, even mocking him and other hard-working students in group discussions. "Why is he getting away with this, Dad?" Michael asked one evening as he explained the situation over the phone. Daniel, ever the calm strategist, listened carefully. "Son, anger won't solve this. Cheaters often thrive because they operate in secrecy. We need proof, patience, and a plan if we want justice." Michael nodded reluctantly, understanding that rash action could backfire. Over the next few weeks, father and son worked in secret. Michael started by collecting digital copies of assignments submitted by Jason, looking for inconsistencies, unusual formatting, and signs of plagiarism. Daniel guided him in documenting timestamps, emails, and communications that demonstrated Jason's dishonesty. They even spoke discreetly with other students who had noticed the cheating, gathering corroborating statements without drawing attention. As the evidence grew, Daniel and Michael realized the scope of the cheating was larger than they initially thought. Jason had been copying work from previous students, using online essay mills, and even manipulating shared project files. Every detail was meticulously logged and organized into a dossier that clearly demonstrated a pattern of academic dishonesty. Michael often stayed up late, reviewing spreadsheets and emails, while Daniel taught him the importance of thorough documentation. "Evidence doesn't lie, son. But we have to make sure it's unassailable," Daniel reminded him. Once they had a comprehensive case, they submitted it anonymously to the professor and the Academic Integrity Board, presenting all documentation, digital files, timestamps, witness statements, and correspondence showing Jason's deliberate attempts to deceive. The investigation began quietly, but the professor soon realized the cheating was extensive. Jason was called in for questioning, but the mounting evidence left him no room to argue. Over the next several weeks, disciplinary action was taken. Jason was expelled from the course, and all his grades for that semester were nullified. The Academic Integrity Board commended the diligence and thoroughness of the investigation, though they did not know the identities of the students who had prepared the case. Michael felt a wave of relief and satisfaction. "Dad, we didn't just get justice for me. We helped everyone in that class," he said, smiling for the first time in weeks. Daniel nodded, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Exactly, son. The smartest revenge isn't personal. It's about fairness. We didn't humiliate him publicly, we exposed the truth in a way that could not be ignored." The experience taught Michael more than any classroom lesson. He learned that meticulous planning, patience, and intelligence could triumph over dishonesty and arrogance. Jason, who had thought he could cheat his way through life without consequence, now faced the very real impact of his choices. And Michael, with his father's guidance, had learned that justice could be achieved without malice, but with strategy, persistence, and unshakable evidence. Daniel had always taught Michael that patience, observation, and planning were more powerful than brute force. So when Michael's prized car, a sleek, carefully maintained sports coupe he had saved months to buy, disappeared from their driveway one rainy night, Daniel didn't yell or panic. He calmly examined the empty space, noticing the wet tire tracks leading down the street. Michael's frustration was almost tangible. "Dad, he just took it. It's gone." Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Well, get it back. But if we rush, we might lose it forever. Let's think this through." Over the next few days, father and son became investigators. They installed hidden cameras around the property, one focused on the driveway, another on the street. Daniel showed Michael how to observe patterns in the neighborhood, noting who walked by at unusual hours and which cars came and went. They also planted a discreet GPS tracker in the car, camouflaged so it could not be detected. Michael couldn't help but pace constantly, peeking out the window every few minutes. Daniel reminded him to stay calm. "We're letting the evidence guide us, son. Rash actions get nothing done." Each evening, they reviewed the footage, identifying a suspicious man who appeared repeatedly at odd hours. His movements suggested he was monitoring the house, possibly looking for another opportunity. They logged every detail meticulously: the color of his jacket, the brand of his sneakers, the time he lingered by certain driveways. Finally, a week later, the man returned. Daniel and Michael were ready. They contacted a local private investigator, providing GPS data and video evidence, and coordinated a plan to intercept the thief when he attempted to drive the car away. That night, Michael sat in the car with the GPS tracker activated, watching nervously as the shadowy figure approached. Daniel's voice came through the earpiece. "Stay calm. Wait for my signal." The thief climbed into the car, clearly expecting an easy getaway. As he started the engine, the tracker alerted the PI, who called local authorities. Within minutes, the car was stopped safely, the thief caught red-handed. Michael's relief was palpable. He could hardly believe the car was back. But Daniel insisted they didn't stop there. They had gathered enough evidence to link the thief to other stolen vehicles in the area, which they handed to the police. Weeks later, the thief was facing charges for multiple thefts, and Michael's car remained intact. Michael turned to his father, grinning from ear to ear. "Dad, we did it. We actually caught him." Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Patience, planning, and staying calm. That's how justice works without putting ourselves at risk. Remember this, son. Strength isn't just about reaction. It's about preparation and knowing the next move. The thief would never again underestimate the determination of a father and son who worked together, and Michael would carry that lesson with him for life. Understanding that clever strategy could achieve what brute force could not. Michael had always loved online gaming, but one evening, his excitement turned to frustration and anger. He had spent months trading in-game currency and rare items with a supposedly trustworthy player who promised exclusive items in exchange for real money. Michael, trusting and eager, had transferred hundreds of dollars, only to receive nothing in return. Worse, the scammer mocked him in the game's chat, taunting him with phrases like, "Nice try, newbie. Maybe next time you'll think twice." Michael slammed the laptop shut, furious. "Dad, he just stole everything and laughed at me. I want to block him and report him." Daniel, ever calm, put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Michael, I understand you're angry. But if we act impulsively, we'll get nothing but frustration. Revenge, real revenge, requires planning and evidence." Michael groaned but nodded, reluctantly trusting his father's judgment. Over the next week, father and son became cyber detectives. Daniel taught Michael how to document online activity safely, tracing the scammer's accounts, recording email addresses, payment transactions, and usernames, while keeping their own identities protected. They analyzed patterns, noting when the scammer logged in, which platforms he used, and how he communicated with victims. They discovered a network of other victims who had reported similar scams, and they carefully compiled a database, linking each fraudulent account and transaction. Michael watched in awe as his father calmly explained every step. "We're not just getting our stuff back, son," Daniel said. "We're making sure he can't do this to anyone else." Together, they reached out to the game's developers, providing a detailed dossier including screenshots, transaction records, and witness statements. They also submitted the evidence to law enforcement, highlighting the scale of the scam. Michael stayed up late for days, tracking any new activity, checking if the scammer had tried to create new accounts or contact other players. They even set up alerts to notify them of any suspicious transactions. Finally, after nearly 2 weeks of patient investigation, the developers and authorities acted. The scammer's accounts were permanently banned, and his fraudulent transactions were reversed wherever possible. Law enforcement began pursuing criminal charges based on the documentation Daniel and Michael had collected. But the father and son didn't stop at just recovering their losses. They anonymously posted warnings on forums and social media, alerting other players about the scammer and sharing safe practices for trading online. Within days, the scammer's reputation was in ruins, and his fraudulent operations were effectively shut down. Michael leaned back in his chair, relief flooding his face. "Dad, we didn't just get our money back. We stopped him from hurting anyone else." Daniel smiled, pride swelling. "That's the best kind of revenge. Not anger, not insults, but turning their attack into their downfall while staying calm and prepared." Michael realized that the thrill of victory wasn't in retribution alone, it was in the knowledge that careful planning, patience, and intelligence could protect not only themselves, but countless others. The scammer, once confident and untouchable, had underestimated the power of a father and son who refused to be victims. And Michael knew that, thanks to his father, he had learned a lesson that went far beyond gaming. Strategy and patience were far more potent than rage, and justice could be served without ever stooping to cruelty. Daniel had always taught Michael that patience, observation, and planning were more powerful than brute force. So when Michael's prized Karasleek, carefully maintained sports coupe he had saved months to buy disappeared from their driveway one rainy night, Daniel didn't yell or panic. He calmly examined the empty space, noticing the wet tire tracks leading down the street. Michael's frustration was almost tangible. "Dad, he just took it. It's gone." Daniel placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We'll get it back. But if we rush, we might lose it forever. Let's think this through." Over the next few days, father and son became investigators. They installed hidden cameras around the property, one focused on the driveway, another on the street. Daniel showed Michael how to observe patterns in the neighborhood, noting who walked by at unusual hours and which cars came and went. They also planted a discreet GPS tracker in the car, camouflaged so it could not be detected. Michael couldn't help but pace constantly, peeking out the window every few minutes. Daniel reminded him to stay calm. "We're letting the evidence guide us, son. Rash actions get nothing done." Each evening, they reviewed the footage, identifying a suspicious man who appeared repeatedly at odd hours. His movements suggested he was monitoring the house, possibly looking for another opportunity. They logged every detail meticulously: the color of his jacket, the brand of his sneakers, the time he lingered by certain driveways. Finally, a week later, the man returned. Daniel and Michael were ready. They contacted a local private investigator, providing GPS data and video evidence, and coordinated a plan to intercept the thief when he attempted to drive the car away. That night, Michael sat in the car with the GPS tracker activated, watching nervously as the shadowy figure approached. Daniel's voice came through the earpiece. "Stay calm. Wait for my signal." The thief climbed into the car, clearly expecting an easy getaway. As he started the engine, the tracker alerted the PI, who called local authorities. Within minutes, the car was stopped safely, the thief caught red-handed. Michael's relief was palpable. He could hardly believe the car was back. But Daniel insisted they didn't stop there. They had gathered enough evidence to link the thief to other stolen vehicles in the area, which they handed to the police. Weeks later, the thief was facing charges for multiple thefts, and Michael's car remained intact. Michael turned to his father, grinning from ear to ear. "Dad, we did it. We actually caught him." Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Patience, planning, and staying calm, that's how justice works without putting ourselves at risk. Remember this, son. Strength isn't just about reaction. It's about preparation and knowing the next move." The thief would never again underestimate the determination of a father and son who worked together, and Michael would carry that lesson with him for life, understanding that clever strategy could achieve what brute force could not. Daniel and Michael had built a modest but thriving catering business in their town. For years, they worked hard, waking before dawn to prepare fresh meals, traveling to events, and making sure every client was satisfied. But recently, a rival, Mr. Lawson, opened a competing catering service just a few blocks away. At first, Daniel thought competition was healthy. But Lawson quickly revealed his true nature. He began spreading false rumors about their hygiene practices, undercutting prices unfairly, and even stealing client leads by claiming he had exclusive contracts that didn't exist. Michael was furious. "Dad, he's ruining everything we've worked for. We can't just let him lie about us." Daniel nodded, but he knew rash action would only backfire. "We're going to fight this smartly, son. We won't stoop to his level." Well, let evidence and strategy do the work. Over the next month, father and son meticulously documented everything. They kept screenshots of misleading social media posts, emails showing Lawson's attempts to poach clients, and receipts proving their hygiene certifications and compliance with all regulations. They also recorded conversations where Lawson promised clients discounts in exchange for canceling contracts with Daniel and Michael. Once their files were complete, they began a quiet campaign. They contacted the local health board, submitting proof of Lawson's misrepresentations and violations. They reached out to community forums, posting anonymous reviews and warnings for potential clients, ensuring the message spread without revealing themselves. They also approached former clients who had been misled, presenting the evidence and helping them reclaim the truth. The effects were swift. The health board conducted inspections at Lawson's premises, uncovering multiple minor violations he had ignored. Clients began canceling their contracts, wary of his deceptive tactics. Community trust shifted back to Daniel and Michael's business, which grew even stronger as word of their integrity spread. Lawson, increasingly desperate, tried to retaliate, but Daniel and Michael were always one step ahead, calmly presenting records and proof to every false claim he made. His reputation crumbled under the weight of documented facts, and soon he faced fines, loss of clients, and public embarrassment. One evening, as they prepared a large catering order for a wedding, Michael grinned at his father. "We didn't just survive, Dad. We crushed him without ever breaking our own rules." Daniel smiled, handing Michael a tray of fresh appetizers. "That's the point, son. The smartest revenge isn't about fighting dirty. It's about strategy, patience, and letting truth and preparation do the work." Lawson's attempts to undermine them had only strengthened their business. For Daniel and Michael, this was more than victory over a rival. It was proof that careful planning, integrity, and persistence could turn even a hostile situation into success. And for their clients, it was proof that loyalty, honesty, and skill always win in the end, leaving a lasting legacy of respect and admiration for the father and son who had outsmarted every obstacle in their path. Daniel and Michael had always believed in playing by the rules. But when a corrupt local official, Mr. Caldwell, started targeting their small family business, they realized that justice wasn't always served fairly. Caldwell was known for issuing arbitrary fines, threatening shutdowns, and extorting bribes under the guise of inspections. At first, Daniel tried to reason with him, providing every license, receipt, and safety record required. He smiled politely during confrontations, hoping logic would prevail. Michael, however, watched in frustration as Caldwell shrugged off the evidence, smirking and demanding fees that had no legal basis. One afternoon, after yet another unexpected inspection with threats of closure, Michael snapped, "Dad, this is ridiculous. He's just picking on us because we're small." Daniel nodded, but he remained calm. "I know, son, but we can't fight him with anger. We fight him with evidence and strategy." Over the next few weeks, they meticulously documented everything Caldwell did. They recorded every visit, noting times, dates, and statements. They captured video of him making veiled threats, photographing documents he tried to manipulate, and collecting witness accounts from other small business owners he had harassed. They even researched laws and regulations Caldwell was supposed to follow, creating a detailed file of his legal violations. Once the evidence was comprehensive, Daniel and Michael began a subtle campaign. They anonymously submitted complaints to higher government offices, including the State Regulatory Board, accompanied by copies of their detailed logs. They contacted investigative journalists who had previously reported on corruption in local government. Soon, Caldwell received official letters citing formal investigations into his conduct, along with notices that media outlets were reviewing his actions. Panic set in. For the first time, Caldwell realized he was no longer untouchable. Inspections now focused on his own office, revealing discrepancies and violations he could not explain. Legal action was threatened, fines were imposed, and his reputation began to crumble among colleagues and other officials. Meanwhile, Daniel and Michael continued to run their business without fear, their preparations and patience ensuring that Caldwell could not retaliate without exposing himself further. Months later, the father and son received a letter confirming that Caldwell had been reprimanded, fined, and placed under oversight. His attempts to intimidate them had backfired spectacularly. Michael leaned against the counter, looking at his father. "We didn't just fight him, Dad. We destroyed his power over us." Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "The best revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about making sure they can't hurt you again and that they learn the consequences of their actions." Caldwell, the corrupt official, would never target another small business in that town without thinking twice. And Daniel and Michael, they had learned that patience, intelligence, and careful documentation could turn even the most corrupt opponent into a powerless figure, leaving justice firmly in their hands. Daniel and Michael had moved into a small apartment in the city, eager to start fresh after leaving Grayson Construction. The neighborhood was quiet, the rent was reasonable, and they were excited about a new chapter. But their landlord, Mr. Thompson, quickly proved to be dishonest. From the very first month, he found excuses to withhold the security deposit, citing imaginary damages and inflated repair costs. Minor maintenance requests were ignored, promises were broken, and he often barged into the apartment without notice. Michael, 19 and fiery, wanted to confront him immediately, but Daniel, ever patient, insisted on a smarter approach. "If we react now, he'll just lie and twist the story. We need evidence, strategy, and timing," Daniel explained. Over the next few weeks, father and son meticulously documented everything. They took photographs of the apartment before moving in, kept every email, text, and note from Mr. Thompson, and recorded the dates and times of each unauthorized entry. Daniel even installed a small security camera in the hallway outside the apartment door, legal under city regulations, to capture any further intrusions. Each evening, they compiled logs, cross-referencing claims of damage with photographs and receipts for repairs they had made themselves. They discovered patterns. Mr. Thompson exaggerated minor scuffs and claimed them as major damage, attempted to charge them for repairs they had already paid for, and even tried to threaten them with eviction despite their lease being valid. Once the evidence was complete, Daniel and Michael escalated their strategy. They first contacted a tenant advocacy group, providing a full dossier of Mr. Thompson's misconduct. They then reached out to a local journalist who specialized in consumer and housing issues, presenting the documentation as proof of repeated fraud and harassment. Within days, a series of anonymous complaints reached the City Housing Authority, prompting a surprise inspection. Officials reviewed the lease, photographs, emails, and security footage. They spoke with Daniel and Michael, who calmly explained the sequence of events. The evidence was overwhelming. Mr. Thompson's violations included illegal entry, improper withholding of deposits, and attempts to intimidate tenants. The housing authority levied fines, demanded the return of the full security deposit, and ordered the landlord to cease harassing tenants. But Daniel and Michael didn't stop there. Using the same documentation, they published a detailed blog and sent it to tenant forums, warning future renters about Mr. Thompson's pattern of abuse. Within weeks, his reputation was ruined. Potential tenants began avoiding his properties, and complaints to the city increased. Daniel and Michael moved out on their terms, having secured another apartment, leaving Mr. Thompson scrambling to repair his tarnished image and deal with mounting penalties. Michael couldn't help but grin as they packed the last boxes. "Dad, I can't believe it. We won. He can't touch anyone else without consequences now." Daniel nodded, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. Patience, planning, and evidence. That's the power he underestimated. Revenge isn't about yelling or fighting. It's about turning the tables in a way he'll never recover from. And so, father and son walked away, wiser, victorious, and united, having turned frustration into strategy, and injustice into a lesson no greedy landlord would forget. Daniel had been working for Grayson Construction for over 15 years. Skilled, reliable, always the first to arrive and the last to leave, he thought he knew the limits of patience. His son Michael had just turned 19 and had joined the company as an apprentice, proud to work alongside his father and learn the trade. But their boss, Mr. Grayson, was the kind of man who saw loyalty as weakness. He was arrogant, greedy, and cruel, cutting corners to maximize his own wealth while underpaying and overworking his employees. Safety gear was outdated, overtime went unpaid, and anyone who dared question him faced intimidation. At first, Daniel tried to shield Michael from the worst of it, advising him to keep his head down, focus on his work, and avoid attention. But Grayson had a knack for picking on anyone who looked competent, and Michael, young and eager, quickly drew his ire. The bullying started small snide comments, belittling jokes in front of other workers, and escalated. One Friday, Michael stormed home, shaking with anger, holding his pay envelope. "Dad, he shorted me again. Third time this month." Daniel took the envelope, his face darkening as he examined it. Grayson had docked nearly half his son's wages. That was the last straw. Daniel knew it wasn't just a mistake, it was deliberate exploitation. He looked at Michael and said, "We're not letting this go. But we have to be smart. We can't fight him with anger alone. We need a plan." Michael leaned forward eagerly. "What do you mean?" Daniel took a deep breath. "We're going to gather every piece of evidence, every unpaid hour, every unsafe practice, every lie. We'll hit him where it hurts, and he won't see it coming." Over the weekend, father and son worked methodically. Daniel reviewed years of time cards, pay stubs, and records of work hours. Michael recorded conversations where Grayson bragged about cheating the workers, secretly snapping photos of broken harnesses, unsafe scaffolding, and faulty equipment. Together, they compiled mountains of proof. They interviewed other employees, carefully documenting their testimonies about unpaid work and unsafe conditions. Each day, the plan grew clearer. "This is more than just about us," Daniel told Michael. "We're standing up for everyone he's taken advantage of. One mistake from him, and we make it impossible for him to hide." Once the evidence was airtight, they acted. They didn't confront Grayson directly. Instead, they contacted the labor board, filing detailed, anonymous complaints. They also reached out to a journalist who specialized in workplace corruption. The following week, inspectors arrived unannounced at the construction site. Workers watched in awe as officials combed through equipment, pay records, and employee interviews. Grayson tried to bluff, his usual arrogance faltering under the scrutiny. Broken scaffolding, missing safety gear, fraudulent time cards. The evidence was undeniable. Michael watched from a distance, barely containing a grin. "Think Hayes sweating yet?" he whispered. Daniel chuckled. "Oh, Hayes drowning." Grayson's world unraveled quickly. Fines for labor violations piled up, back pay was ordered for all affected employees, and local media coverage tarnished his reputation. His clients canceled contracts, wary of being associated with an exposed cheat. Grayson fumed, shouting and blaming everyone, but no one cared. The father and son duo had outsmarted him. In the aftermath, Daniel and Michael didn't just leave the wreckage behind. They founded their own small construction company, one that treated workers fairly, paid properly, and provided safe equipment. Word spread fast. Former clients of Grayson started calling. Their company grew steadily, built on trust, fairness, and the skill both father and son brought to every project. One evening, as they locked up their modest but thriving workshop, Michael turned to his father with a grin. "We didn't just beat him, Dad. We replaced him." Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "The sweetest revenge isn't making him suffer. It's building something better in his place." For Daniel and Michael, this wasn't about anger. It was about justice. It was about proving that no one can exploit the hardworking forever, especially when they underestimate the bond between a father and son. And for Grayson, the greedy boss, the lesson was unforgettable. You can't cheat a family that's smart, patient, and united and expect to get away with it. Ethan had always been a quiet kid, the kind who preferred drawing superheroes in the corners of his notebooks to running around the playground. He was 12, thoughtful, and painfully aware of how much bigger and louder other kids were. That made him a target. Kyle, the school's notorious bully, had set his sights on Ethan months ago. Every day brought a new humiliation. His lunch disappeared from the cafeteria, his backpack was dumped into puddles, and his precious notebooks were torn to shreds. Teachers saw the aftermath but did nothing, mumbling something about boys being boys. Ethan tried to hide it at home, but his father, Daniel, wasn't blind. Daniel had raised Ethan alone, and he could read every flicker of emotion on his son's face. One evening, when Ethan dropped his backpack with a heavy sigh and avoided his father's gaze, Daniel knew something was wrong. "Son, what's going on?" he asked. Ethan shook his head, forcing a smile. "Nothing, Dad. Just school." Daniel studied him carefully. "Nothing doesn't leave bruises on your arms. Nothing doesn't make you afraid to look me in the eye. Tell me who's doing this." Ethan's voice broke. "It's Kyle. He won't leave me alone, and no one does anything about it." Daniel felt his own anger rise, but he remained calm. He had been bullied as a kid and remembered the helplessness, the shame, the feeling of being invisible. He swore his son wouldn't carry that same weight. The next day, Daniel parked his truck near the schoolyard, pretending to wait for Ethan, but really watching. Sure enough, Kyle shoved Ethan against the fence, snatched his notebook, and laughed as his friends cheered. Daniel clenched his jaw, but he didn't rush in. Confrontation would only make things worse. That night, he sat Ethan down at the kitchen table. "We're not going to fight him with fists," he said. "We're going to outsmart him." Ethan frowned. "How?" Daniel smiled. "By giving him exactly what he wants, only with consequences." Daniel was a mechanic, handy and clever with tools. He dug out an old backpack Ethan no longer used, and together they rigged it with a small die pack, the kind banks used to mark stolen money. He explained carefully how it worked, tugged too hard on the zipper, and a cloud of indelible blue dye would explode, coating everything around it. Ethan's eyes widened. "Will it hurt him?" "No," Daniel said firmly. "But humiliation? That'll sting more than any bruise." For the first time in weeks, Ethan laughed. Monday morning arrived. Ethan walked into school carrying the rigged backpack, nervous but determined. His father's words echoed in his mind. "You're not helpless anymore." Kyle spotted him immediately. "Hey, loser. What've you got for me today?" Ethan held the straps tighter, pretending to be scared. "Leave me alone, Kyle." That only fueled Kyle's arrogance. With a smug grin, he yanked the backpack from Ethan's hands and ripped open the zipper. Boom. A cloud of brilliant blue dye exploded outward, covering Kyle's face, hair, and clothes. The entire hallway erupted in laughter. Kyle staggered, coughing, trying to wipe his face, his arms dripping blue. His friends backed away, unwilling to risk getting hit themselves. Teachers rushed over, shocked. Kyle, what on earth happened? Ethan shrugged innocently. I don't know. He grabbed my bag, and it just went off. Kyle was sent home immediately, humiliated, his skin and hair stained a bright, mocking blue. The dye clung stubbornly, refusing to wash away for days. By the time he returned to school, every kid had heard the story and dubbed him the Smurf. He avoided Ethan, too ashamed to face him. At home, Ethan looked at his father with pride. Dad, it worked. Daniel ruffled his son's hair. Told you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fists. It's consequences. From that day forward, Ethan walked taller. Other students treated him with respect, no longer as an easy target. And Danielle's words stayed with him for life. Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about making sure they can't hurt you again. Kyle would never forget the day the tables turned, and Ethan would never forget the day his father taught him that the smartest revenge leaves marks on pride, not flesh.